Hello and welcome to this episode of Fishing Discoveries, where I'm going to react to the first reactions and a little bit of an unboxing, if you like, of the Fishband Hypermicro CR-HM06, great BFS reel that's just hit the market. So I'm going to get right to it, and if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos, obviously click the subscribe button, and don't forget to also click on the notifications bell so that you get notified when I do other reel reviews and get out on stream and start testing some of these things. This one though is an unboxing and a first reactions video, so I'm going to take you across right now to the second camera and give you a look at the box that it arrives in. You can sort of see, obviously, fairly standard packaging. Inside it, there is quite a nice touch. You do actually get a bag with the reel, which you don't always get, even with some of the JDM offerings. And then, you know, bubble wrap, instructions, what have you. The usual sort of gubbins. But I'll put that to one side, come back to me for a second, and just fetch the reel out. First impressions are that it's a really nice palmful. It's a very small, really lightweight. I think it clocks in at 150 grams, and very, very smooth operation. Pretty attractive black and red sort of livery that it comes in. I'm not quite sure what they're going for with the name, but it is at least very distinctive. You're not going to get it mixed up with too many other offerings that are out there. And obviously, BFS reel, it's got a very highly ported spool. And in fact, this is one of the real surprising elements of it, if you like, because I think this might be one of, if it's getting close to the lightest stock spool on the market, and that includes JDM as well as CDM reels. So that's quite a development. Other features, you know, it has a sort of medium fast, sort of not quite HG type, you know, super fast gear ratio, 6.6 to 1. I believe you get 70 centimeters of line recovery per handle turn, and as I said, just as I picked it up before, first impressions are it's very, very smooth. Feels well engineered. The chassis, the body is actually aluminium, which is a bit of a contrast to some of the options like Fishband have the GH5, which is one that I guess put them on the map a little bit. That's the GH5 for comparison. It's a lot more sort of plasticky feeling reel, but it does have pretty fantastic FTB style brakes. I mean, I don't know how close you can get to complete sort of copyright issues with those brakes, but they're very, very similar to the Shimano FTB brakes, seemingly lifted directly from it. But the GH100 does have a bit of a plasticky kind of brake adjustment disc there on the edge of that side plate, compared to the Hypermicro, which actually has, to my mind, kind of a much nicer and more positive adjustment mechanism. And you can probably just hear that clicking away. And it is nice and easy to adjust, very slick, very precise. Feels a little bit more solid. I think that aluminium chassis definitely does big favours in that respect. The other things which I wanted to sort of point out, as well as the clicking drag star, which again, if I just stop speaking for a second, you'll be able to hear that clicking away there. So you're getting nice positive adjustment on the drag star as you sort of click through the different settings there. You've also got, and this is a nice touch, I think, you've also got the clicking spool tension adjustment, which is very nice and precise and positive too. And then again, with that adjustment knob being metal as well as you know, it's actually a bit nicer than the Alphas Air TW 20, which is a more plasticky feeling adjustment knob. We'll get to a couple more comparisons of that in a second. But again, one of the big selling points is, as well as the clicking drag star and the spool tension, it's also got the clicking drag, which a lot of people end up sort of doing, aftermarket kits to add drag clickers to even pretty high-end JDM reels as well. So all in all, it's a very, very interesting offering from Fishband, and it's going to be interesting to see how it fares, because, as I say, one of the real interesting comparisons that I'd like to make is with, I'm not going to say that it is, it's going to be like equal, it's just going to beat like, the JDM sort of reels. But what I'm interested in is, because it's going to be at a lower price point than those reels, what proportion of the performance can you get out of this offering, which is going to be a lot more affordable than pretty much all of the JDM reels that you could lay your hands on, particularly in the BFS sort of space. So I think it's a really, really interesting option, and it's one of those where people getting into BFS, not being hampered by equipment that is difficult to use, but at the same time doesn't have a huge really high price barrier to entry. That's a really, really critical aspect, I think. So I'm just going to open up the reel and have a look at a few more things before we kind of take it out on stream, which I'll cover in a subsequent video. And I'd like to do some tests, head to head with a couple of other reels, another Fishband reel, and also I think I'll take the Alphas Air out as well, and just see how it fares against them. But yeah, just before I sort of sign off on this video, just want to run through a couple of the slightly more detailed elements, like the spool weight and things like that, for you guys that are really into some of those details. Obviously we'll expand on those as we go forward, and as I get more use out of the reel and more sort of experience with it. But for now, if I just have a look at the sort of side plate removal mechanism, it's a little trigger underneath. Peel that brake plate off, and you can see inside there the sort of fairly standard bank of magnetic brakes, and there's a bearing sat in the centre of that side plate as well, as you'd expect. I have had a little play with that and to remove it, to see what might happen if we come to sort of modding the reel and adding different bearings, to see how that affects the performance. But I did notice that was actually quite snugly in there. It took quite a lot of careful effort just to sneak that out there, out of its kind of housing. But once it came out, it was fine, and you could drop in other bearings as well. But I've not actually cast it under that sort of setup yet. But you can see from that, that, like I say, you've got this kind of standard bank of magnetic brakes. This is more plastic, and a lot of the side plate is the kind of the euphemistic carbon, which is some kind of polymer, plasticky polymer. But as I say, the actual chassis of the reel itself, the main chassis of the reel, is aviation aluminium, which is nice and rigid, and it's also super light. Just popping the spool out there, speaking of super light, you can see that it is the sort of longer spindle version, which is slightly different from the option that you get with the GH100. And when you compare the depth of the lip on the edge of the spool here, that's actually a really interesting comparison too, because there's pretty good, tight sort of tolerance to it seems, to the reel body. So there's a good chance that might actually be a little bit more resistant to having loops of line sort of getting thrown and caught into the behind the sort of the brake plate, which is obviously a huge boom. I did just pop a little row bearing there just for comparison, that for teasing a few future tests, if you will. I have calibrated these bad boys just before I turn the cameras on. So this is with the spool bearing and the bearing pin as well. And again, I will repeat these measurements several times, and there'll be an accompanying blog post that'll have the full details of it. But it's clocking in at around about that sort of 7.7 grams with the bearing and the pin. And if I just do a quick change here and slide that pin out, I've got it pre-prepared ready in time-honoured children's TV fashion. And yeah, it's previous measurements when I've done a couple of these, it does clock in at around about 6.16 grams, which for a stock spool is super light. There may only be one or two other Japanese reels that have a lighter stock spool, so this is not an aftermarket spool. Obviously you can get some incredibly light options for certain reels, but this one out the box is looking pretty impressive, I would say. So putting that back together, I think the last thing I will do before I'll just pop the spool bearing back on, I think the last thing that I'll do for this video is just give a little bit of a free spool sort of a test. What I have noticed is that even using a fairly, just messing about with the reel, turning the crank a little bit, I've noticed that the stock bearings have actually freed up quite a lot, because they do come supplied in sort of, fairly solid grease, and it's quite packed in there. So again, among the other things that I will be doing is cleaning those out, putting some finer lubricant in there. Less viscous lubricant in there. But I will do some tests just straight out the box, so that what you can expect, as soon as it arrives with you, what sort of performance could you expect to be getting out of the reel. So I'll pop this spool back in and give you a little indication of the free spool performance, and make sure, well, putting it in the right way around helps, doesn't it? Just jabbing that in there. Kind of doing this sort of slightly left-handed around the camera. Find the trigger. Snap that in, just check that that's popped out like that. So again, in operation, there's a little bit of play, a tiny bit of play of the handle, but really not a lot. It does feel pretty solid and really well engineered. That's the spool tolerance I was talking about before, and you can see that lip on the spool actually extends quite well into the body, and that is actually a deeper lip than, as I say, on the GH100. So that's quite an interesting modification. Very smooth in operation, and it's not the kind of the infinity sort of spin that you might get from some of the JDM reels straight out the box, but it's not bad, and it does feel very smooth. So as I say, what I'll do is I'm going to spool it up with some line, take it out on stream, and then cast it against some comparable. I'm going to bracket it with, as I say, an earlier Fishband reel, and then also give some comparisons to the Alphas Air as well, the 2020 model, which I'm really looking forward to. So I'm going to try and try it out with a few different lure weights, different casting styles, different sort of scenarios for fishing it, and I will mess around a little bit with the line that I put on there as well, so we can compare it and sort of make it standardized across those different reels. And then it gets to be fun, because then I'm able to change out the bearings or clean the bearings and sort of do upgrades and that kind of thing, which are very affordable modifications, but I'm really keen to see if and how that actually affects the performance as well. So if you do want to catch those upcoming episodes, and I'll be examining other reels as well and doing more casts and more tests on stream with a variety of BFS and even some bigger chunkier bait casting reels as well, then you know what to do. You click on that subscribe button and make sure that you check off the notifications bell as well. That way, as soon as a new episode goes live, YouTube will very kindly let you know. And of course, if there's stuff that you want to see in future episodes, do let me know in the comments, and I will catch you on the next episode.